The second studio album from American then thrash metal band Metallica was a clear evolution from their debut release in terms of production, instrumentation, musical complexity, and sheer ambition. And while some might favor their follow-up album for the number one position, let's talk about my favorite Metallica album, Ride the Lightning. So I discovered the album in the fall of 1984, soon after its release. And yes, I know I've told this story a couple times now on the channel, but given this video's topic, it's a little hard to avoid. So let's go through it again. Previous to this album's release, my pal Eric and I would do our usual weekly visit to Strawberry's Records and Tapes, going through the metal bin and blind buying numerous records that would become classics of the genre later on, including Metallica's debut album, Kill 'Em All, which for one reason or another we just kept passing on, not being sure if it'd be worth the buy. Anyways, fast forward some months later when Eric came over to my place carrying a mystery record inside a brown paper bag. He wouldn't show me what band it was, but he was damn excited about them and told me that I really needed to hear this record. So he turns his back to me so I can't see the jacket. He puts the needle into the groove and we begin to listen. When the acoustic intro to the opening track begins, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention. In fact, looked at Eric with a face that said just that, to which he responds, "Wait." And at the 41-second mark, when the track kicks in proper, my jaw hits the proverbial floor. Totally blown away. So a couple tracks play, and Eric still won't tell me who this band is. And I think it was when we got about midway through track number 3 that I said, "God damn it, tell me who this band is." To which he pulls the jacket out of the bag, and of course, it's Metallica with Ride the Lightning. Soon after, we went back to Strawberries, and I snagged both Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All, and thus my love for this band's classic-era material was born. Of course, this favorable opinion was not often shared by more mainstream listeners of the time. Outside of my close-knit group of friends, the other kids I knew seemed to not know what to do with this level of speed and aggression in their heavy metal. And naturally, the press of the time either avoided it or totally trashed it, such as this excerpt from the Pittsburgh Press dated February 24th, 1985, in which the reviewer states, quote, "This quartet's brand of all minor key heavy metal is of the most mindless, least proficient, least sensitive sort. James Hetfield is more a growler and yeller than a singer, and there's little evidence they've ever heard of the word melody. The resultant music usually is a mishmash of noise. Ride the Lightning is for people who don't know any better by a band that doesn't either." End quote. And speaking of this mindless and insensitive album, it was recorded between February and March of 1984 at Sweet Silence Studios in Copenhagen, Denmark. And although Metallica gets prime credit for its production, I'm sure they got a little bit of help from Flemming Rasmussen, who had also produced Rainbow's Difficult to Cure album a few years earlier. Also worth mentioning is the increased writing involvement of bassist Cliff Burton, who at this point had introduced his bandmates to guitar harmonies, complex melodies, and orchestral structures. Even Hetfield had said they wouldn't have gotten to where they had without Cliff. It's clear that he pushed Metallica to the next level, and Ride the Lightning is proof positive of that. I mean, for as much as some folks like to overstate former member Dave Mustaine's residual writing presence on 2 tracks here, Burton's contribution buries anything Dave did in this band. And you can fight me in the comments if you need to, because the rest of us know that I'm totally right. Anyways, the album also spawned one commercial single, such being Creeping Death, released on November 23rd, 1984 on the UK label Music for Nations. The B-side contains the tracks Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg, both of which cover tunes and collectively known as Garage Days Revisited. Mine is a 1990 reissue from Vertigo Records, also from the UK and on black vinyl. However, the original Music for Nations pressings that were available in 1984 came in a number of color vinyl variants, including red, clear, white, green, and blue. Also, Creeping Death is the second most played song by the band live, having performed it over 1,600 times in their career. Also, they did have a couple other 12-inch singles released only as US promos. The first was for the song For Whom the Bell Tolls, released in 1985, containing both the studio version and an edited version that chops a little over a minute off the album track. The other promo-only single was for the track Fade to Black, also released in 1985. In addition to classic black, it also came in green fluorescent vinyl and was likely aimed at a radio market that otherwise might not play the heavier tracks on the record, like the first single, for example. Anyways, as for the tour of this album, it lasted from November 16th, 1984 to December 31st, 1985, with a total of 82 shows, beginning with 25 dates in Europe during the last 2 months of 1984 with Tank as supporting act, followed by a mostly North American tour in 1985 with Wasp as co-headliner, and then select festivals in both America and Europe in the summer of that same year, with their most notable festival performances being the Day on the Green Festival in Oakland, California, and the Monsters of Rock Festival at Castle Donington in England, both in August. The 6 songs from Ride the Lightning that made the setlist were Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, Creeping Death, and the Call of Ktulu. And in September of 1985 at the Metal Hammer Festival in Germany, Metallica premiered Disposable Heroes from their upcoming album Master of Puppets, as well as performing that song and the debut of the song Master of Puppets on the very last night of their tour in San Francisco. And if wondering about vinyl pressings of Ride the Lightning, there have been more than 140 over the decades, including picture discs and unofficial pressings, as well as a comprehensive box set for the title released by Blacken Recordings back in 2016. The latest release of Ride the Lightning is the 40th Anniversary Edition, remastered and pressed on blue splatter vinyl, also by Blackened Recordings and released in 2024. And I should mention the cover art here, which was done by AD or AD artists, which I'll assume to be some sort of art group. Strange that there's no information on the specific individuals or individual who made this cover, and this does seem to be the only publicly known work attributed to the name AD artists or AD artists. But it is an iconic cover, to be sure. However, the cover didn't just come in blue. At the time, Burnett Records in France had misprinted the color on the jacket, and so their pressing came out as green. 400 of those got out the door, and now they're considered collector's items. Current prices on Discogs for the green cover version run between $177 and $364 US. Of course, the holy grail of Ride the Lightning pressings is the original Megaforce one, and prices for it on Discogs range from $255 all the way up to a whopping $2,750 US, depending on condition. And if you're looking for a Megaforce copy in near mint shape for both media and sleeve, prices start at about $600 US. As for what I have currently, there's the 2008 pressing from Warner Brothers, as well as my 2016 pressing from Blacken Recordings. And of course, I also have the CD from the 1980s as well. You've seen CDs before, but there you go. I guess one day I'll get an 84 Electra pressing like the one I had as a kid, and of course I would really love to have the Megaforce pressing. You know, when someone leaves me a large sum of money in their will. Anyways, that's it for details. Let's get to the track by track. Starting with side 1, track 1, we've got Fight Fire with Fire. Track opens with an acoustic passage written by Cliff but played by James. It's a tad deceptive because it instills a sense of calm right before that battering tremolo main riff punches in. And it's clear how influential this acoustic inclusion was. A slew of metal bands would open their records this very way, including Pleasure to Kill by Creator, Alice in Hell by Annihilator, Eternal Devastation by Destruction, and The Only Safe Place by Abattoir, to mention but a few. Anyways, tremolo riffing follows us through the track and provides some brutality, so no real room for Burton's bass gymnastics. When the verse kicks in, we get Hetfield's almost robotic cadence, a bit caveman and basic, but also full-throttle shout singing, over top what is clearly the fastest track on the album. Truth be known, I miss Hetfield's old voice, and this track definitely reminds me of that. This is also when we're hearing the increased production value from that of the last record, with some good separation and clarity, notably in the drums, which have an overall snappier sound to them. Solos here, melodic amidst the chaos, both tasteful and short. Also, for all the crap Lars gets for his playing in this band, it's hard not to recognize his blistering performance on this one, especially with the double bass work. After the final chorus, the track name is shouted repeatedly for effect, and the end riff takes us to a quick dive bomb and then an explosive conclusion. And it's literally an explosion. But thankfully, the world doesn't end with this track, as we still have 7 more to go. So the lyrics for this one cover a classic Cold War era topic, which is total nuclear annihilation. Favorite lyrics are definitely the third verse, which is, "Soon to fill our lungs, the hot winds of death, the gods are laughing, so take your last breath." So I'd imagine that if I ever made a top 10 favorite album openers list, this entire track would definitely be on it. They do revisit this format to open their next album on the track Battery, and it's equally effective there as well. And of course, Metallica would go on to lead with acoustic guitar in a given track on other albums to come, so a little bit of a pattern there. Ultimately, Fight Fire with Fire lets you know that the demo sound and Nawabim worship of Kill 'Em All has been replaced with some proper thrashing mayhem, and that you better get ready for a ride. In fact, Ride the Lightning, which of course is next. Moving on to track 2, we have, as I said, Ride the Lightning. Track opens with an almost martial riff supported by slow single beats that are closely followed by percussive bass notes. After a quick guitar slide, the main riff kicks in while the marching vibe from drums and bass continue. Hetfield brings a bit more melody into his shout singing on this one, but still maintains some vitriol and aggression. It's a mid-paced track for the most part, though I really love the ramped-up bridge with its return to utterly speedy riffing. Hammett's alternating noodly and moody soloing follows, then a quick stop-start segment, before Hammett's second and insanely manic solo rips the lid off everything, with some very cool wails and descending chords. Not to mention Cliff's inhumanly fast bass picking underneath. Then back to the chorus, another verse, and then chorus again, with Hetfield's vocal fade-out leading to some variations on the main riff, then a bookending of the opening, and then track fades out with an echo. So the lyrics for Ride the Lightning are about a man condemned to be executed by electric chair, which makes sense given the artwork on the album cover. I mean, this is the title track. He's wrongly accused and is basically preparing to die, which isn't too dissimilar in theme to a certain Iron Maiden song called Hallowed Be Thy Name. I like to think it's a subtle nod to that, topically speaking. As for favorite lines, the chorus always does it for me. Flash before my eyes, now it's time to die. Burning in my brain, I can feel the flame. So a punchy song with a real heft to it and plenty of headbanging moments throughout. A strong track following another strong track and leading to yet another strong track. Moving on to track 3, we've got For Whom the Bell Tolls. Track opens with what sounds like a series of bell strikes, not too far off from what AC/DC did to open their song Hell's Bells, but those aren't entirely bells on the Metallica track. They're actually the sound of an anvil being struck with a hammer by Lars, with the sound effect of a bell mixed in. Anyways, 2 bell strikes in, we get pounding drums marching their way in, along with what many confuse as an eerie guitar riff, but is actually Cliff playing heavily distorted bass guitar with some added wah pedal. The fact that the notes are in a higher register might lead many to believe it's guitar, but it isn't. But it is an immensely cool sound and bass line, providing a necessary level of menace to the progression of riffs to follow. Love the switchover with the bass line at about 40 seconds in, with guitars that first go into crunching chords, but then join Cliff's bass line with even more pulverizing menace than before. Definitely my favorite part of the track, hands down. At this point, we shift to the verse riff and chorus riff teaser, then to the verse proper with Hetfield's almost epic shout vocals. Also love the use of drums and cymbals for accent and effect throughout. And it might be interesting to note that the soloing here is comparatively absent when compared to the other tracks on the album. The band spends a lot of time keeping a marching and military vibe and not deviating much from that. Thing is, it really works for the song. But if you listen closely, the slow ending segment has some distant wailing solo work underneath, so it is there. Speaking of which, that measured and doomy chord riffing, along with those guitar wails that slowly fade the track out, makes this one of the best song endings on the record. This is also the 4th most played Metallica song live and is considered one of the great classics from them. Throughout the decades, it's been performed over 1,600 times, right behind Seek and Destroy, Creeping Death, and Master of Puppets, and in that order. As for favorite lyrics, they're right in the second verse, and they are, "Crack of dawn, all is gone except the will to be. Now they see what will be, blinded eyes to see." Funny thing, though, is that when I was a kid, I heard the line as "now they see what will need blinded eyes to see," which I always thought sounded cooler, but was also very wrong. Anyways, a simpler and even slower track than the last. And what's significant about the progression of the first 3 songs is that despite the drop in tempo, the record still maintains heaviness and impact. But we are about to slip into power ballad territory next, more or less, so let's see how that fares when compared to the rest of side 1. Moving on to track 4, we have Fade to Black. Track opens with an acoustic and electric guitar combo, very ponderous and melodic, which sets the tone for much of the track. Acoustic guitar once more from Hetfield. Cymbals and drums are restrained in these calmer verses to match the vibe. Hetfield vocals are certainly lower register and more melodic as well, but still maintaining some of that signature gruff of his. Both verse parts build to a more epic-sounding riff, but either return to the acoustic-electric section or, in the case of the second verse, continue on to the next riff, which is certainly more uplifting, even if the lyrics are hopeless and fatalistic. Soon after, the track switches gears again with a somber twin melodic section, alongside some solo meandering, and then the whole thing slowly fades out. Fades to black, I guess? Anyways, the lyrics here are fairly grim, covering the topic of suicide in no uncertain terms. Sadly, more than a couple young people back in the 1980s actually took their own lives while hearing or even quoting the song in a suicide note. And while a song isn't responsible for killing someone, it is a serious subject that should always be addressed. So I guess I'll throw in a PSA here and say that if you're thinking about ending your life, you really should talk to someone and get some help first. As this song should suggest, you're not alone in this one. I mean, James Hetfield is literally a living example of this. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, getting off that soapbox, favorite lyrics here are, "Emptiness is filling me to the point of agony. Growing darkness, taking dawn. I was me, but now he's gone." So I guess a number of listeners, perhaps more in the decades to follow, weren't excited about Metallica putting out their version of a ballad. But I gotta say, I'm not one of them. I feel the variety in both the track differing from most of the others, but also the progression within the song itself really adds to the record. And I didn't find it out of place back in 1984 when slower tracks on metal albums of all sorts were expected. And since the lyrics are pretty dark and certainly not about chasing chicks or losing chicks or whatever with chicks, I feel it stands apart from traditional hard and heavy bands doing ballads in general. Definitely a fan of this track, and I like it considerably more than other quasi-ballad efforts from the band, such as One or Nothing Else Matters. Decent for what it is. Flipping over to side 2 and track 5, we've got Trapped Under Ice. Track opens with an isolated riff, quickly followed by a drum roll, and then once more into the thrashing foray, bringing us back from a fairly mellow vibe at the end of side 1. In this earliest part of the track, you can really hear some strong Exodus vibes, which is funny because it's the verse riff that Hammett somewhat borrowed from an Exodus demo track when he was in that band, but that sounds more like Metallica, whereas the opening riff, not borrowed from Exodus, actually sounds like Exodus. Did you get all that? Anyways, we're back to a total speedfest like Fight Fire with Fire, so we have a bit of that at the start of each side of the record. Pretty cool. Lots of tremolo picking and Hetfield's increased aggression in the shout singing of the verses, then chord-heavy choruses. Really dig the chord riffing and vocal melody in the bridge, which changes things up quite a bit. Some soloing to match the style from the opener follows, then to another verse, then another chorus. Love the way Hetfield ends his S sound on the word ice. I don't know why, I just do. Then, of course, the track goes a few rounds with the main riff, and then the riff ends abruptly with cymbals ringing out just a little bit longer. As for lyrical content, this one is about being frozen cryonically, then waking up and realizing you can't get out of the chamber. It's a very science fiction direction for Metallica, but of course, Slayer also tackled this very same topic the year previous with Cryonics from their Show No Mercy album, so there's that. Anyways, favorite lyrics are, "Crystallized as I lay here and rest, eyes of glass stare directly at death. From deep sleep I have broken away. No one knows, no one hears what I say." So a return to speed from the album opener keeps the momentum of the record going, which does remind me that Ride the Lightning is a very well-paced album with a good mix of peaks and valleys in terms of tempos and moods. Wasn't really thinking about that until we got to this track. So yeah, another solid thrasher here. Moving on to track 6, we have Escape. Track opens with melodic twin riffing and drum fills, followed by a shift to a steadier, more restrained riff passage, bringing a more traditional but still heavy approach. Hetfield stays in his standard shout singing with a modicum of aggression, but adds a pinch of the melodic for chorus lines. Chorus overall has an almost anthemic quality to it, but again with a bit more catchy melody than other parts. Lots of chord strikes ringing out to make way for Hetfield's vocals, giving more of a spotlight to the latter. Really dig the bridge, which gets a little dark by comparison with some tolling bells in the back. Or simply the anvil again, take your pick. Soloing has some mid-pace noodling to it and leads to a breakdown of riff and drums, followed by siren howls and fading up vocals repeating the line, "Life's for my own, to live my own way," then a slow fade out of the end segment. So the lyrics are about going out on your own and living life according to your own will. We'd see this lyrical theme again in Dyer's Eve 2 albums later, though considerably angrier than this one. In any case, my favorite lyrics in Escape are in the bridge, and they are, "See them try to bring the hammer down. No damn chains can hold me to the ground." So the band really isn't fond of this song, which was originally titled The Hammer. Cliff wasn't excited about it, but he did do some solid bass work on it, which might be more about trying to make the best of the situation. The band was pressured to write another song for the album, and so they wrote this one in studio to fill out the album and appease the label for a more commercial-sounding track. Lars was fine with Escape, but Hetfield and Hammett didn't want to play it live for one reason or another. But Metallica did play it live, exactly once, at Bader Field in Atlantic City, New Jersey in June of 2012, and that's it. It has been covered by other bands such as Gojira, Hatebreed, and Spirit Adrift, so it has some fans out there, including me, because I really do love this track and have zero issues with it, whether back in 1984 or even now. Of course, let me know in the comments how you feel about Escape. Maybe you dig it, maybe you don't, maybe it's just a non-issue entirely. Definitely would be fun to hear some takes on this one. Moving on to track 7, we've got Creeping Death. So the track opens with an epic-sounding segment, which would make sense given the subject matter. This quickly shifts to a solid thrash riff, which teases out the chorus riff a bit, then jumps straight into the verse and Hetfield's vocals, adding some power stylings to his standard voice. As they've done with some of the other choruses, the guitars favor ringing chords to make room for vocals, and that's a pattern I'm catching a bit. It's effective, and it definitely adds more weight to what's being sung. There are some fun bass fills, but this time they're more buried in the mix. I mean, not in Justice for All buried, but buried nevertheless. After another verse and another chorus comes the solo, which is standard Hammett noodling, mixed with a bit of chaos. The section is then interrupted by a dramatic pull-off slide from bass and guitar, leading us to the utterly godlike bridge, easily many people's favorite part of the track, including mine, of course. I mean, even live, a crowd of 40,000 people all shaking their fists and chanting "Die" over and over again on top of Hetfield's anthemic vocal lines is simply awe-inspiring to witness. I mean, if you've seen them live, you've experienced it firsthand. Anyways, after this, we return to another verse and chorus, then jump to the end passage with some moody soloing, followed by a noodly run, then bookended by the opening riff, and then a dramatic flourish that gives it a very live-sounding finale. So, the lyrics are inspired by events chronicled in Exodus, and that's the Bible and not the band, regarding the plague of the firstborn and the subsequent Passover. You might think this would have been more of a thing Stryper might do, but it fits in so seamlessly with the album in terms of lyrical delivery and instrumentation that it's simply no big deal that the song is basically a Bible lesson put to thrash metal. Given that, my favorite lyrics are the entire third verse, which is, "I rule the midnight air, the destroyer. Born I shall soon be there, deadly mass. I creep the steps and floor, final darkness. Blood, lamb's blood painted door, I shall pass." So I know I joked about Stryper, and you know what, given the historical context, this could have also been a topic for an Iron Maiden song if you really think about it. But Metallica really do pull this one off, whether you view it as actual history or simply entertaining literary fiction. Cliff came up with the song title after they watched the Ten Commandments movie, and Kirk brought in the bridge from an old Exodus song that they never released. So, part of an Exodus song and a song taken from Exodus. Anyways, this is a bona fide Metallica classic and stands toe-to-toe with some of their very best material, past and present. Moving on to track 8, we have the Call of Ktulu. This instrumental track, originally titled When Hell Freezes Over, opens with a fade-up of wind leading to acoustic guitar playing and some subtle bass notes making their way in, here and there. And the bass is really important in this track as it often sets the ominous mood throughout. Once drums and electric guitar come in, bass then brings in some distorted wah pedal madness alongside some cool mid-pace guitar riffing. Soloing really comes in about halfway through the track, first moody and then wailing intermixed with some sweet fretwork. Then it bounces around from main riff to soloing to variant riffs to more soloing. But I do love the final 2 minutes of the song when it revisits some of that epic sound that they flirted with in a few of the other tracks here. Lots of riff and drum beat matching, lending further to a militant or marching feel, but with some of Hammett's melodic souling along for the ride. After this, the track bookends with a callback to the opening riff. Then after a drum roll, it kicks into a totally bombastic crescendo, again with a live-sounding end, similar to Creeping Death. Anyways, this is definitely a long instrumental at almost 9 minutes, but it does create some seriously eerie mood and contains some solid riff passages. Overall, a nice mix of creepy and epic, and it gives Burton a whole lot of room to do his thing. It's a sensible ender to the album, but if it didn't exist, I might have been fine with Creeping Death being the final track, as it too has that same dramatic closeout and is a bit stronger overall. So, sadly, I never got to see this tour, and in fact, didn't know at the time that the band had actually played a mere hour away from me at the Agora Ballroom in Hartford, Connecticut, along with Wasp and Armored Saint. Truthfully, I wasn't hitting club shows at that age, but that would soon change. Let me know in the comments if you got to see this tour, because apparently I really love to be jealous. Also, I do know that there are a lot of fans out there who cite Master of Puppets as their favorite album. And for me, it's a very close second, and I totally get why it would be someone's favorite Metallica album. I have some serious nostalgia for that record, which I'll discuss in a future video. But for me, Ride the Lightning is not just my gateway to this band, but also the sweet spot between the youth and aggression of Kill 'Em All, and the complexity and overall songcraft we get on Master of Puppets. For me, it really is the best of both worlds. Of course, I'm not the only one who digs the record the most. Ride the Lightning is also James Hetfield's favorite Metallica album. And I'd even say that the album has done pretty well for itself with fans over the decades, having certified nearly 7 times platinum in the United States alone, not to mention having charted in no less than 20 countries. As for favorite tracks on the album, it's fair to say that the first 3 songs are just a triple punch to the gut and really define the rest of the album. So Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, and especially For Whom the Bell Tolls will always be my favorites on Ride the Lightning. But you know what? Maybe toss in Creeping Death as well. I mean, it's pretty great too. Now, of course, this is my favorite Metallica album, but what about yours? Is it this one? Is it another one? You should let me know that. And any other band you'd like me to cover in this series? Or even anything else that this video brought up for you in the comments below. Love to hear from you. And of course, if you just found my channel for the first time, my name is Matt. This is the Accusation Network, where each and every week I do videos on classic and modern metal, as well as metal vinyl collecting. If you like the sound of that and you haven't subscribed to my channel, it'd be really awesome if you did. Also, maybe like this video and share out my videos with some of your friends on social media. And of course, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.